Hello, and thanks for joining us. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on the New Hampshire Water and Wastewater Rates Dashboard. My name is Tess Clark. I work here at the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. Okay, and today we have dozens of people joining us from the state of New Hampshire and also a handful from some nearby states, so welcome. This tool should be useful to everyone here. This session is one of several webinars conducted by the Environmental Finance Center Network for the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. On that note, I would like to hand it over to Annalee Harkins. Annalee is the Data Specialist and Project Manager at UNC Environmental Finance Center. So Annalee, I'm going to transfer the screen over to you and let you take it away.
Thank you, Tess. So, good morning and thank you for joining us. My name is Annalee Harkins and I'm the Data Specialist and Project Manager here at the Environmental Finance Center based at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And our mission here at the EFC is to enhance the ability of governments and other organizations to provide environmental programs and services in fair, effective, and financially sustainable ways. We particularly focus on water and wastewater systems. My role at the EFC is to manage all of our statewide rate surveys and dashboards, which are tools that we create to help utility managers and other decision makers effectively evaluate their rates. This is our first rate survey and dashboard for the state of New Hampshire, and we are very happy to be providing this tool and additional free resources for the state of New Hampshire, thanks to our funding of our survey partner, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, who funded this project with assistance from the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. Okay, so let's get started. That's me, and you can see on the right, this is a map of all of the states that we have dashboards in, and so New Hampshire is one of the newest ones to join the group, and we currently have dashboards in about 18 states and growing. So this is something we're expanding and renewing every year. More and more dashboards are joining our group and being renewed regularly so that the rates are staying up to date, which is great. And we hope to continue that with New Hampshire as well. All right, a few objectives for the webinar this morning. First, we're going to learn about the Water and Wastewater Rate Survey, become familiar with the features and benefits of the New Hampshire Water and Wastewater Rates Dashboard, and learn how to compare one system's rates with another's more effectively than traditional methods. Okay, first I want to mention our survey partners, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and Time Bond. So the New Hampshire DES has been doing these regular water and wastewater rate surveys for about 20 years. This is the last survey that they did back in 2015. So we are very excited to be partnering with them to conduct the survey and also provide more resources for water and wastewater utilities in the state, doing more analysis, having tools like the dashboard and other things like the tables and report, which I'll mention later on. We also got the assistance from Time Bond, who are a private consulting group focusing on environmental services like water and wastewater. And they also have been doing rate surveys in the New England area, particularly in Massachusetts and Connecticut, for about 2 decades. So they also have a lot of experience in that realm. So it was great to have their help on collecting some of the rates in New Hampshire. Okay, so first I just want to mention, what do we mean when we say rate survey? You might be wondering, did we call up everybody and question them, grill them? Well, if you are one of those citizens, hopefully remember that we did not do that unless we had questions about your rates. So you see this map on the left is all of the utilities that we got to participate in the survey. And participating just means that we received the rate schedule of water and wastewater for that particular utility. So we contacted 162 rate charging utilities within the state between August 2017 and February 2018, and 140 responded. A smaller number, about 45, also provided their financial data. And so all these town logos, you can see, we got their rate sheets and we transformed them into rates models in our database. And that's how we're able to model all of these different consumption points and variables, which we'll see in the dashboard. We also have some additional data sources that we're using this dashboard. We're utilizing census data from the 2012 to 2016 5-year estimate of the American Community Survey. We also are using HUP6 watershed information from the U.S. Geological Survey, system characteristics from the EPA's Safe Drinking Water Information System, and comprehensive annual financial reports from local governments. So, who is in this survey group? Like I said, there's 140 utilities, and altogether they're serving around 760,000 water customers. We don't actually have the data for the number of sewer customers, so water customers is just what we have right now. The majority of those are municipalities, and we also have some districts and about 18 not-for-profits. Most of those utilities provide both water and sewer services. So you can see in the chart here on the right, there were 63 water and sewer utilities, 57 that provided just water only, and only 20 that provided just sewer only. And these utilities combined serve 87% of the people in the state served by community water systems. All right, so next we're going to jump into the dashboard and how it works, what it is, and kind of how to find your way around it to be the best use to you. So the first thing you'll see at the top is this drop-down menu here. I'm using Portsmouth as an example. So you can either start typing in the name of your utility, and it will show up in the search bar, or you can, just scroll through the alphabet and select it from the drop-down menu. The next thing we'll talk about on the left here, this is the consumption amount slider. It's set at a default of 6,000 gallons or 802 cubic feet, which we're using as kind of the default consumption point in the state of New Hampshire. In the Department of Environmental Services survey, they use an annual consumption amount of 71,996 gallons, which is almost exactly 6,000 gallons per month of usage. So you'll also see where there's these 3 radio buttons. So it's set on water, but you can also select sewer or water and sewer if those services are applicable to the utility. And you can use this slider all the way down from 0, which is basically the base charge, all the way up to 15,000 gallons at 500 gallon increments. You'll also see that the bill amount for the selected consumption amount is displayed right underneath the slider, and there's also the amount in price per gallon. So here it's a very small percentage of 1 cent per gallon. Underneath that, we have the map of all the utilities represented in the state, and the comparison group selector is right here at the top, and that's going to be a really important feature that we'll definitely get into more. Right now, it says we're comparing to all utilities in the survey, and since water is selected, that means all of the water utilities. So there's 126 rate structures that are being compared currently. On the right here, this right side of the dashboard, is where the dials are, which are kind of the main meat of the dashboard that give us a lot of information about the utility and the rate structures represented. These first 2 at the top compare to your peer group, which you've selected here over at the drop-down, which right now is on all utilities. We have bill comparison and conservation signal. So let's talk about those comparison groups, like I said, all utilities. From the drop-down, you can select a variety of comparison groups based on your utility size, what kind of rate structure you're utilizing, your geographic location or watershed, your customer demographics, like customers that have the same median household income, the type of your utility, including your water source type, such as groundwater or surface water, and your financial information. For sewer customers, there's also wastewater treatment type comparison group. So there's a lot of different ways to compare your utility rather than just kind of the typical look at the town to the left of you and the right of you and try to be lower than them, which you know is not generally financially sustainable and doesn't really account for all of the variables that go into financing your water wastewater system. Okay, so let's go more into these top two dials. The first one, bill comparison, is directly related to what we've chosen here on the slider to the left. So you have these different shades of yellow and green, and the first part we want to talk about is this dark green band in the middle. This constitutes the middle 50% of utilities, otherwise known as the median, between 25% and 75%. Again, it's stating how many gallons you're choosing at the top. So we have water bill at 6,000 gallons. It's telling you what the median bill amount is, so at exactly 50th percentile of your peer group, and also what the average is. We included average as part of New Hampshire, which is something that we haven't done before because we know that the Department of Environmental Services bases a lot of their decisions and analysis on average bill amounts. So in those dials, we do have median as well as average. And the average is this little dotted line here that you'll see. It's also underlined there with some dots. So median is this middle dark green band. The light green band to the left and the right of the big dark green band in the middle are the next 15% of utilities. So we have 15% lower than the median and 15% higher than the median. So this goes from 10 to 25% on the left and from 75 to 90% on the right. So this means, you know, you're either falling a little bit above your peer group or a little bit low. If you're looking at both of these green sections combined, that's 80% of the utilities in your peer group. So that's really the bulk of the people that are in your group. So if you're falling within that range, you're definitely, you know, falling right in line with the other utilities in your chosen peer group. The last color, these little yellow bands on the very left and the very right, are the lowest and highest 10% of bills for those utilities. So either you are charging far below what other utilities in your group are, or charging a lot more than other utilities. We also have on the bottom here the minimum bill and the maximum bill listed for that chosen utility group. All right, moving on to the next dial, we have conservation signal up here on the upper right. So the conservation signal has kind of a similar color scheme, and these colors are cut into quartiles. So in this example, we see this is like 25, 50, 75. So in this kind of bright green quartile, this utility is falling in there. So they're charging, you know, in the higher range of conservation signal. And what we mean by conservation signal is it's a pricing signal that you're sending to your customers to encourage them to conserve. So the more water that they use, for example, the more you're going to charge per 1,000 gallon or cubic feet to encourage them to cut back on their usage. So in this example, it's a moderately strong conservation signal. And again, this is compared to your comparison group. So that is, you know, has to be taken into account because 334 may not seem like a strong conservation signal in another group or in another state, for example, but within this comparison group, it is. And we also, again, have that median as well as the average, which are pretty close. All right, these bottom two dials on the dashboard compare to benchmarks. This is not related to your utility group. It's really comparing to yourself and to established benchmarks. All right, this first one on the left, cost recovery, very important one, is directly below the bill comparison for a reason, because these two are obviously tied together. If your revenues are not above 1, that is, you're not even making ends meet as far as your operating expenses, that's directly related to the rates and fees that you're charging. So let's look more into the cost recovery dial. So we have this red, yellow, green color scheme, kind of like traffic lights, to give you just an instant idea of how you're doing financially according to your cost recovery ratio, which is your operating expenses divided by your operating revenues divided by your operating expenses, including depreciation. And we make a point of including depreciation because it can be very misleading to not account for that, to account for the inevitable decline and replacement of your infrastructure and equipment. So it's very important to include that so you're not thinking that you may be better off than you are when really you're just not preparing to replace your equipment. So if you are at below 1, you're not even making those ends meet. You're not able to cover your operating expenses, which is not a great place to be. We have this small then yellow section between 1 and 1.2. And we chose 1.2. It's a little bit arbitrary. There are different funding agencies that use different metrics to decide whether or not they'll lend to you. It could be 1.2, it might be 1.1. It really depends on them. But for us, we chose 1.2 because it's kind of right there in the middle. And that means that you do have revenues sufficient enough to cover your expenses, but it could be problematic in the long term if you also don't have enough to save for future maintenance, capital improvement plans, emergencies, and equipment failures. This last section, the dark green band on the right side, is really where you're aiming to be. You at least want to be in the yellow, but to be in the green is great. That means that your revenues are likely enough to pay for your day-to-day expenses as well as your long-term goals. So if an emergency happens, if you have an unexpected decline in usage, any sort of reason, you are able to at least have a cushion to fall back on and not have to, panic and, go into emergency mode. We do have a small slice of yellow here on the very right side, which is yellow again, which is just kind of a caution of, is your operating ratio really that good? Either maybe you're not actually accounting for depreciation in a way that is accurate, or maybe there are affordability concerns for your community. If your ratio really is that high, it just might be something to take a second look at and see if you're either potentially causing a future problem for yourself or for your community. All right, the next style, this one on the lower right, is median affordability. And this one, as you can see, is a spectrum of kind of this light tan color all the way to this darker orange or rust color. And this percentage is the percentage of a household's annual median income. And this is based on the census data. So every utility on this dashboard is matched to a community listed in the census data. So if your community is spending a higher percentage of their annual income on water and wastewater bills, that could be problematic. However, we have a lot of caveats for this dial. We know that it's a very complicated issue. So if you click on this little blue oval here to the right of the dial, which again actually are on all the dials to give you more information, you can get some more information on affordability and some more nuanced ways to look at it. So you can read more here. Since affordability doesn't really have a universal metric that captures all of the factors and nuances that may play a role in your community. So we have additional information, including a free tool, our Residential Rates Affordability Assessment tool that you can download and use to get a more in-depth look at affordability in your community. And we also have some more information about what the percent MHI indicator means, what it assumes, and some other metrics that are being used besides percent MHI. Okay, We've spent a lot of time on this main tab of the dashboard, rates comparison, but there are two other tabs. So the characteristics tab does have additional information on demographics, system characteristics, and financials for your chosen utility. So again, we're using Portsmouth as an example here. And like the dials on the main tab, you're able to choose your comparison group, and these numbers will change based on that. So for Portsmouth here, we're again looking at all utilities, and this is giving you details on that city in particular, the number of connections, service population, as well as their financial data, and some demographics about their household size, median household income, and the poverty rate. Then you can compare that to the median for all the utilities in the survey, which is, again, the selected comparison group, and see how they compare. So you might say, okay, they have a little bit of a smaller household size. They're a little bit more wealthy than the median for the other utilities and have a slightly lower poverty rate. You can also compare these numbers to the statewide statistics. So there are 146 total rate structures in the survey. And for the state of New Hampshire, these are the numbers for the latest survey data, which is, again, the 2012 to 2016 5-year American Community Estimates from the census data. There's also just some details about what type of utility it is. This is the municipality, of course. The county primary service area is the community that it's matched to based on the census, and the date that their rates were last changed. Okay, the last tab here all the way on the right is the links tab. And this has additional information on the survey itself and our funders, as well as links to additional tools. These are all free. So we have more things that you can look into regarding your rates, financial planning for the future, looking into affordability. You can also request direct assistance through the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. And for New Hampshire, we also have some of our partners within the state, of course, the DES, the Municipal Association, Granite State Rural Water Association, Tighe Bond, who helps collect rates in New Hampshire for us, and RCAP Solutions. And of course, you can also send me feedback or comments to that link there. All right, now we get to take a look at some of the additional features and try the dashboard out live. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to navigate to it just so you're not plopped there without knowing how you got there. So this is our EFC website, efc.sug.unc.edu. A lot of dots, I know. But up here on the top bar where you have resources, you click on Utility, Financial Sustainability, and Rates Dashboards. And this will take you to that map that you saw earlier. If it will load. Here it is. Okay, so here are all the dashboard states. We click on New Hampshire. And then it's taking us here to this page, Water and Wastewater Rate Survey and Dashboard. And there are these different buttons for the resources that we provide. So there's the rates dashboard, the tables, you can view your utilities rate sheet, and also view their summary report, which is forthcoming. So today we're going to look at the dashboard. So I'm clicking on that. And here's some brief instructions. Select a utility from the drop-down, and you'll be able to select your service and consumption. Real quick before we get into playing around with the dashboard, I do want to point out there's these additional tabs at the top of the dashboard. This includes additional information. After this webinar is finished, we will have a recording in here, so people who weren't able to view it will be able to check back in here and see how to use the dashboard. We also have some instructions, some visual instructions pointing out different aspects of the dashboard in case you just want something to reference. Again, we have like the color explanations and all these kinds of things for reference. Related resources includes some of those other free tools that I mentioned, as well as the tables and the report for the survey. And there's also an FAQ, which addresses some of the common questions, like where did these data come from? What if my utility is not included? What if my rates are wrong? So if you click on any of these, you'll be able to get some more information about those questions. And of course, if your question isn't answered, you can always just email me. I will get back to you. Okay, but let's look at the dashboard on this first tab here. So I'm going to go back to Portsmouth since we're using that as a good example. So you can see right away that just looking at the bill comparison, Portsmouth is in the median for this comparison group of all utilities. Now let's look at all these other groups here. You'll see that this first one, similar number of water accounts, is grayed out. And what that means is that there aren't a sufficient number of utilities or rate structures within that group to provide an effective comparison. So we set a cutoff at 10 utilities or 10 rate structures in that group, because if you have fewer than that, it can get kind of wonky, like what is the median of 4 utilities, for example. It can just be misleading in the analysis. So we have set that at 10. So if you see that grayed out, that's why it is that way. However, we can also look at any of these other ones. We can look at similar customer income, and it's going to give us more information. Income over $60,000. You can look in your specific watershed. There's 21 rate structures compared in this group. Again, they're pretty solidly in the median. You can look at same wastewater treatment type if we switch over to the sewer bill here. This one is just other, unfortunately. We have 5 main categories of wastewater treatment type. So some of them are other. There's, things about, all the fun terms about activated sludge and all that, which really just, I think, sounds like a superhero villain, maybe. But yeah, you can choose any of these things to give you a more nuanced view of who you're really comparing to. So in this example, oh, here we are, the sewer bill. So it looked like for water that they were very much, in the middle of their comparison group, but for sewer, they're actually in the top 10%. So a lot of these variables can influence how you're actually presenting in your comparison group. This also is affected by the consumption amount. If we're down here at just 1,000 gallons, they're almost in that 10 to 25% range. So all of these things really, you can play around with and see how you're comparing. And this is especially useful if you know your average customer consumption amount, if you're deciding, how does our base charge compare at 0 gallons, or what about our more high volume users? What about like 14,000 gallons for a large family, for example? So just a point to kind of play around with these things and pick some things that make sense for you or that you want to explore more. So the conservation signal over here, we can also see in this example that it's fairly high. It's in this last quartile, and it's $9.36. And what this means is that it's the price for 500 gallons, in this case of sewer disposal, after 10,000 gallons of use. So we use that cutoff so it's not just your everyday use, it's really beyond non-discretionary use. And again, we have more information if you want to check what that means. You can click any of the little blue boxes. In this example, Portsmouth is also, looks like, doing fairly well in terms of cost recovery. If we click on the blue dial, we can get those data points as well. And in terms of median affordability at this consumption, again, because it changes based on what you choose, it looks like they're in the higher range. But if you really want to dive more into that, you can use the residential rates affordability assessment tool, which looks at the bill's impact on all income ranges, down from below the poverty level all the way up to the much higher ones. All right, so let's say we are Portsmouth and we are considering whether or not to raise our water rates. Go back to water here for a second. And let's just do 6,000 gallons, kind of our default point. and say, what if we wanted to raise our water rates? We need to pay for, you know, an upcoming project that's going to be really expensive. Well, a little hack you can use is this slider down here at the bottom, right below the map, effects of raising rates by. You can use this to select, let's say, maybe 30%. We want to raise our rates by 30%, see what that looks like. So this center line here is where the original line was, the original marker, and now the dial has moved to over here where the bill would be if you did raise rates by 30%. It also shows you how your cost recovery would change, how your conservation signal would change, and possibly how your affordability would change as well. We do have this notice over here on the left that this is kind of a blunt instrument. Obviously, we can't predict exactly how you know, this would turn out just by using the slider. It's not an in-depth rate study, of course. But we do have then the link to our more in-depth tool that shows you different scenarios of how you can raise rates over time or modify your rates in different ways. And there's this caveat that for every 10% increase in price, so here we're at 30%, we assume a 3% drop in demand. So by increasing rates 30%, we're assuming at least a 9% drop in demand because we're assuming that customers are going to be affected by that price signal and want to consume less. So that's just something, you know, you can look at right there. And it does go all the way up to 150%. So if you're really looking for a big rate change, you can go ahead and try that out. I also want to mention while we're down here at the bottom, we do have these numbers here for reference of a statewide average annual bill for 71,996 gallons, which again is about 6,000 gallons a month for water and for sewer. So if you're more used to looking at those numbers on an annual level instead of monthly, they're right there for you. This is statewide. Also, I don't think I've mentioned this before, all of the bills, all of the rate structures in this survey on this dashboard are standardized to monthly amounts and to thousands of gallons. So if you were using, let's say, quarterly billing and cubic feet, we have converted all of that to thousands of gallons and monthly billing just so everything is the same across the board. There's also these buttons right here for links to the rates tables and the summary report. We have additional links to them elsewhere, but you know, just in case you want to pop over to them right there. Okay, let's get back to some more things that we can use to change how Portsmouth appears. This upper right button here, edit data or add utility, is useful if you are not included in the survey. Let's say your utility didn't respond, or you know, perhaps you didn't even know about it. You can add yourself in this way, and if you're an existing utility, let's say Portsmouth, you can change your data to see how it will look. So you can also use these example ones just for fun. Let's say you can make your own utility or see how, so for example, this affordability issue one shows that the median household income in this case is very, very low, and the bills are very high for this income bracket. So that's just an example to see what that would look like on the dashboard. But if we want to play around Portsmouth, you can click this button, Clone Utility Portsmouth. And let's say you had updated financial data for, let's say, fiscal year 2017. If you have those numbers, you can just plug them in right here. Let's say maybe they had some higher expenses this year. You can say, you know, maybe we've had an economic downturn locally, and we want to make sure that our rates aren't impacting our community too hard. You could, you know, change the median household income. Well, that's a really big change. And you can also plug in your monthly bill at whatever consumption amount you include here. So if you say, okay, the rates are going to go up for water and stay the same for sewer, all of these things will now be reflected on the dashboard. So you can see cost recovery went down, mean and affordability went up a little, and conservation signal, I think it went down actually, I don't remember, but the bill went up as well. So that's just something that you can play around with, whether you're included in the survey or not. Though I do want to mention that these changes that you put in here will not be written to our database. They're just saved on your computer locally. So just keep that in mind. If you wonder, why it disappeared next time you looked at it, it's because it's just on your computer. Okay, I think we've covered a lot here on these tabs. Let me go back to our presentation. Okay, so you might be wondering, when exactly am I going to use this tool? Well, the first thing is that it's a great place to start with your annual rate review. We do recommend that utilities review their rates about every 2 years, just to make sure that they are keeping up with inflation, keeping up with any projects that they may need to do in the future to pay for those. So that's something to look at just right off the bat. These dials will give you an idea of where you are. When presenting to boards or other decision makers on the need to change rates, this is a great tool for that, because boards may not know all of the details and be able to understand the complexities of running a water or wastewater system. And here's an example of a utility that did use screenshots of the dashboard in their presentation and report to the board, and they were able to effectively pass a rate increase because of that. And they're showing, here, like, we're in the red, we're not making ends meet. And they went through step by step and showed how they were charging lower than their peers, that the affordability wasn't really an issue for the town, and they needed to raise rates in order to remain financially sustainable. So just a tip there, if you want to have a kind of an easy visual aid to be able to explain what you need to say to your rates board or whomever it may be. You can also use this tool to explain rates to customers, because again, we hope that it is fairly easy to understand, even though it does have a lot of robust and complex data behind it. And for private systems, you can also consider it as part of your PUC rate case, especially in showing like how you compare to other utilities, and that can be of the same ownership type, so of other private or for-profit utilities. So these are just some options of how this tool can be useful to you. Like I mentioned, we do have additional resources. We have standardized rate sheets for all the utilities in the survey, so that gives you the details for water, wastewater, inside town, outside town, commercial rates if available, irrigation if available, industrial rates. We have all the variables listed out for you, so you can really just pull this up and see it there in an easy to understand way. We also have tables of rate structures and the computed bills at certain consumption amounts for residential, commercial, irrigation, and industrial rates. We also have tables of the residential tap and impact fees, which we surveyed as well during the water and wastewater rate survey from about August to February. And we have an upcoming summary report that's going to go into more of the analysis of the utilities and the rate structures included in this survey. All of these are going to be available at this link here, which actually just go to. You can get to it either by, either by going to that map under resources, going to the utility financial sustainability and rates dashboards. Oh, it's a mouthful. Going to that map and just clicking on New Hampshire, that will take you to the page with the different buttons. Right there, you can choose what you want. The tables, you might be wondering, well, what exactly does that mean? We have in PDF and Excel spreadsheet form. So if you wanted to look at, really look at these numbers yourself and be able to manipulate them and filter them, you can download these for free and use them however you want. So I think this is downloading, maybe. Oh, there it is. Just take a look at that. My goodness. I don't think it's being influenced by me clicking it multiple times. Anyway, maybe it'll open at some point. And then the last thing I want to mention that's available right now is viewing your utilities rate sheet, like I said. So this is in the tab up here. It's also at the button right there that you can click. And this has all of the utilities included in the survey. If we were just going to pick one of the Portsmouth, since we've used them already, and it pops up in this PDF. It's a minimum of 2 pages. It can be up to 9 or 11, depending on how many variables we have. But it does have some kind of basic yes or no questions, information about tap and impact fees, when the rates were last changed, and then again the details of the rate structure. So what the base charges are, if there are different blocks, what those are, and it's all there for you to download, use as you will, whatever you need to do. Let's see if this is finally opening here, just to show you the tables. Somehow it went back to 0. It was at 10. Okay. Just enable editing here. So we have all of these different options. There's rate structure details as well as the computed monthly equivalent bills. So if we just want to jump to that, rate table 2, we can see we have some information like service population, what their cost recovery ratio is, including depreciation, and then these different consumption points from 0 up to 15,000 gallons, and whether they have inside or outside rates. If they do have outside rates, those are listed here as well. And if you wanted to look more at the rate structure itself and see, what kind it is, we have information on the billing periods, the base charge, if there's any consumption allowance included, what type of volumetric rate it is. I will mention that the majority of rate structures in New Hampshire are a uniform rate, which means that beyond the base charge, every unit of consumption or disposal is charged exactly the same. So even if you use, 2,000 gallons versus 15,000 gallons, the rate is going to be the same. It's not based on how much you use in terms of like influencing conservation or anything like that. Each unit is charged the same amount. So lots of uniform rates here. But again, this goes through all sorts of things: irrigation, commercial, list of participants, great stuff. You can filter it, you can print it out, do whatever you want. Okay, so I think that's covered all of our resources for this survey that we have produced so far. And again, the summary report is going to be coming out soon. So if you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear it. Here's my contact information in case you have something you'd like to send me later, as well as my phone number. And again, thank you for staying and learning about the New Hampshire Water and Wastewater Rate Survey, as well as the dashboard. And I look forward to hearing any questions you may have.
Great, thanks so much, Annalie. Like you said, we are. You can use that question dialog box to type in your question. We'll be accepting questions throughout the next, 10 to 12 minutes or so. So the first question that we have for you, Annalie, is if the data for a system, say I have a system, if my data for my system is incorrect in the database, can it be updated?
Yes, it can. We do regular updates of all of our dashboards. So if you just email me your updated rates information, we can definitely include that. Like I said, we do updates about once a quarter. So it may, depending on where we are in the year, it may be like a week before it's updated, or maybe a little longer. But we do update all these things regularly because we want the information to be as accurate as possible and to be as useful as to the utilities represented.
Okay, great. So, and the next kind of question, this goes back to your discussion of comparison groups. So that comparison groups kind of let you highlight a specific variable that might impact rates or one thing or another. What are the opportunities for, is there the functionality to be able to pick more than one comparison group, same water source type or alongside medium income, or is that something beyond the tool at this time?
Currently, we can only do one comparison group at a time, but we also take custom data requests all the time for utilities that are looking for, something beyond what the tool can immediately provide. So if you have a particular question, you can just email me or the general EFC email, which is efc@unc.edu, and we can provide you with further data that you might use.
Okay, great. And then the next question, what is a fire protection charge and how can you understand that when using the tool?
Oh, good point. A fire protection charge, which you may have seen, especially in some of these like fire districts that are included on the dashboard, is a charge that's used to kind of recover the cost of having enough capacity in the water system to be able to, effectively fight fires even at peak use. So if everyone was using, if they all had their sinks turned on and were running the dishwasher and whatnot, you would still be able to have enough capacity to be able to fight a fire. So it's really involved in kind of increasing the ability of the system, whether that's going into hydrants or pipes or what have you, just so that people will be able to pay for that service without it going into some other method. So it does come up on water bills sometimes, so it can also be used in property taxes or other methods like that.
Okay, great. So kind of going back towards the end of your presentation where you were speaking about uniform rates, you mentioned that most utilities in New Hampshire already have uniform rates. What are the implications for that for promoting conservation?
Good question. So we tend to think of increasing block rates as promoting conservation. And by increasing block, I mean that as your consumption increases, your rate, per 1,000 gallon also increases. So maybe if you're only using 2,000 gallons, your rate is $3, but if you're using maybe 10,000 gallons, your rate has gone up to $6 per 1,000 gallons. However, a uniform rate can be as effective or possibly more effective than an increasing block rate if it is high enough. So if you had an increasing block rate that maybe there wasn't much differential between the blocks, it was like $2 and $3, that would be less effective than if you had a stronger uniform rate. Let's say it was like $6 per 1,000 gallons. So it really depends on how those rate structures are structured. So one can be more effective than the other, but it really depends on, how you're structuring your base charge, if there's a consumption allowance, and if you want to, encourage conservation, you have to think about those different variables and how it makes sense for your customer base and what they might respond to.
All right. Okay, and this is another question about rate structures. This is a little bit more general, but maybe you can give it a good shot. What are the, is it possible to have different rate structures for different sectors? Can you have a rate structure for residential users and a different one for commercial customers? And what is your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. You can have as many rate structures as you want. There are some utilities that just have one. It's one size fits all for everybody, whether they're residential or industrial or inside town, outside town. And you can go up to, as many variables as you want. You can have, again, different rates for people inside town limits versus outside town limits, for commercial customers, for residential, irrigation. It really depends on what kind of customer you're trying to target and what message you intend to send to that customer. So though it can be fun just to be creative and, come up with 16 different rate structures, you do want to think like, what purpose is that achieving? So maybe a one size fits all rate structure works for you and works for your town, and you don't need to go into anything more complicated. But if there are certain goals that you have in mind, like perhaps encouraging commercial development in your town, maybe you would want to have a lower commercial rate, for example, or to have a decreasing block for your commercial rate. So it really depends on what goals you have and what kind of customers you're trying to target. But really, the sky's the limit in terms of how many rate structures you want to have. So of course, you have to think how effectively you'll be able to communicate that to your customers so it's not confusing to them, and so it's also not confusing to your own billing system.
Okay, and I just want to mention that we are getting some specific questions about particular water districts and whether they may or may not be in the database. And I think we can follow up with you separately about that. If you asked one of those questions, someone will get in touch with you, just because for a specific question like that, we want to make sure we answer specifically and give you the right data. The next question, can a tool such as this one have a negative effect when comparing to your neighboring towns?
A negative effect. Well, depends on what you mean by negative. If you are looking at the town, just down the road, and you're saying, hey, their rates are lower than ours, and that's going to make us look bad, that's really more of a point about communicating to your customers and to your board about what is really going into the service that you're providing, and the differences between you and the town down the road. As we've mentioned, there are a lot of different variables based on the age of your infrastructure, how many people that you're able to spread those high fixed costs out over. Obviously, it's economies of scale are a very big issue in water and wastewater, and that's why it's so hard for smaller systems to be able to keep rates low, because those costs are really high, and you need to pay them. So that's an issue depending on customer demographics. There's a lot of variables, and we do have additional kind of communication toolkits and guidelines on how to present rates effectively and get your customers to understand that they are paying for a service and not just a commodity. So if you're interested in that, we do have some more links on our website, and I could possibly email those out later. But if that's something you're interested in, I would recommend that approach rather than saying like it's negative, because at the end of the day, you want to provide a service that is obviously safe for your community, meeting regulations and standards, but it also is financially sustainable. So at the end of the day, if you're not being financially sustainable, you're also not protecting public health. So that's really the bottom line.
All right, thank you. So we are reaching the top of the hour, so we're just going to do a couple more questions here. And if you are submitting questions and we don't quite get a chance to go over it all together, we will make sure that we have some sort of follow-up with you, so no need to worry there. Annalie, this is kind of a question about maybe you want to use the rates dashboard to help you budget for a particular cost, such as a maintenance cost, which are possibly ongoing. How would you suggest doing that, or what would be some steps that you could use to start doing that process?
I mean, if you want just kind of a quick look on how that might work, you could use the edit data or add utility function and see how, if you have a particular amount in mind and you know how many customers you have and how you would be able to spread that expense out over that amount of customers, you could use edit data or add utility to increase those bill amounts, or you could use the raise rates by percentage slider at the bottom of the dashboard underneath the map. However, I would really recommend our water and wastewater rates analysis tool or our plan to pay capital improvement fund tool, because those really get more into kind of exact plans on how you can do things, give you different scenarios depending on what your needs are and what your rates are and what you're really trying to achieve. So the dashboard is good for a quick look, but definitely delve into those other more in-depth free tools to get a better understanding of how those options could work for you.
All right, great. So it is 11:28, so I want to, before we close for the day, I do want to take care of some last sort of minute loose ends. So first, like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we do have a EFCM blog that we update that has sort of lessons learned and from our technical assistants. So at this point, if you're interested in reading that blog, you can let us know here and we can get that set up for you. And many of you may be already subscribed, so if so, we understand, just let us know. And I'm just going to give you 2 more seconds to respond here. And 1. Okay, and then lastly, this is a question we always ask. Are you interested in receiving in-depth technical assistance for your small water system? Our Smart Management for Small Water Systems project does provide technical assistance. So if you know that you really need help using a tool like this or doing rates analysis, this is a good way to let us know. And we can give you a survey to see if you qualify and then set you up with an expert. So I'm going to give you just 3 more seconds here to respond. 2 and 1. And last order of business, we do have a evaluation that we like to hand out. So that's going to come out through the chat, and you will also get that in our follow-up materials. So please go ahead and fill this out if you would like to. And with that, Annalie, do you have any closing comments that you would like to make?
Really, thank you all for attending. I'm really excited about the survey and the results and the tools that we've been able to put together and share for the state of New Hampshire. If you have any feedback, if there are certain features that you think would be useful to you or more questions you have, again, just get in touch with me. My email is right there, aharkins@sug.unc.edu. And I really look forward to hearing your feedback, again, on how you use the tool. So if you have a good experience, if you have some questions, whatever it may be, I'd love to hear about it. And thanks again for attending.
All right, thanks. Have a good day.